Hi, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of our interview with Oliver Stone. In this part, we're going to talk about his views on RussiaGate, his interviews with Putin, and the backlash he's received from it in the mainstream news media in the United States, plus his suggestion for Men of the Year. It just might shock you. You know, I wanted to ask you about, just in general, if we could start off talking about, because you just interviewed Vladimir Putin, as we mentioned, and I want to go into some of the criticisms of your interview with him, because I thought they were really kind of crazy. But has RussiaGate? Can you just talk about RussiaGate in general? What you think about it? And because what I think about it is that it's made détente with Russia almost impossible for Trump to do. And it's weird to see the left attacking Trump from the right, saying that he has to have a more muscular response to a nuclear power. And so go ahead, you just take that wherever you'd like.
Well, it's a very superficial issue, and it's a lot of noise, and America's missing the point. This morning or 2 days ago, they threw on a whole laundry list of issues against Russia: meddling in the election, poisoning an agent in Britain, undermining American democracy, so forth and so on. It's just all crap. There's nothing there. The biggest, our election was not undermined by Russia. Our election was fiercely contested, as you pointed out many times. Mrs. Clinton made some major mistakes, but we must look, when we talk about meddling, look at the power of Israel to meddle in our election. Look at the AIPAC lobby in Washington, which has every senator and representative pretty much by the throat. Scary. They control them in the sense that they can't go in any way question our commitment to Israel. In addition to that, you have people like the Koch brothers, or whatever you pronounce them, and people like Sheldon Adelson. These are the real interventions that occurred in our election, as well as the Republican machinery laid out by people like Tom DeLay to suppress votes. This is the greatest damage to democracy. Hardly Russia, they're a dent if they did it. And I asked Putin this question, and, he did the right thing for his country. He's not going to say anything about it because he really isn't. It's an insulting question, considering that America has meddled in Russian elections endlessly. I mean, going back to 1996 with Yeltsin, putting Yeltsin into power, and then again, we intervened to some degree in the 2012 Russian election, and most recently we insulted Russia by implying that they stuffed the ballot box this time around, and it's just nonsense. Putin was a definite popular favorite, largely because he pushed back against America and NATO, who were getting closer and closer to the throat of Russia. Let me remind you that this all started really in a bad way in 1999 with Mr. Clinton opening up the NATO, expanding NATO against the word that we had given to the Gorbachev people in 1989-90. This is a very disastrous decision, followed by our withdrawal from the ABM treaty, our bombing of Serbia, trying to disintegrate the Yugoslav Republic, founding Kosovo, attacking with bombs, 55 days, the capital of Serbia, Belgrade. I was there, saw the damage. And then we continued. ABM treaty, we withdrew from the ABM treaty in 2002. The list is long here. Ukraine, even in 2004, we were messing in Ukraine with the color revolutions that we put out there. We tried in Georgia. We tried it in Georgia. We tried it in, God, I forget the list of offenses we've done, but we take it right up to the Ukraine. In 2014, we did the same thing again, and this time we pushed over a coup, or as Obama said, we brokered a deal. And we continued to expand NATO, 13 countries all around Russia. We put ABMs in around Russia. We have ABMs on the Pacific coast. We put in Korea, we put the new ABM system, I forgot the name, the Aegis system into Korea. And we're arming Japan to the teeth, contrary to their constitution. So we violated everything since World War II. We've never given up an inch of ground. We've circled Russia and we've circled China. We're giving a very strong message. They don't buy for 1 second that we're fighting North Korea in this thing. They know that this stuff is aimed at Russia and China. So, I mean, you have to deal with each of these things because if you're President Putin, you have to understand his position in these matters, as you should for President Xi in China. And we don't even think about what other people think. We just think about what we think. That's the exceptionalism of our position. We're right. what we want counts, and we don't even hear through our media. We don't even hear what the other side is thinking. That's why I did the interviews, to try to shed some light, at least bring to the American public some notion of what Mr. Putin is saying.
So, and that was a great service you did, but then of course the media here in the United States, I was reading a review of your interview with Putin in Rolling Stone magazine, and it was very disappointing because, as you just laid out, the aggressor has been the United States. After Reagan promised Gorbachev we wouldn't advance NATO, we have advanced NATO right up to their border. We're sending NATO troops. We're sending warships to the Baltics, like you just said. We're pointing all these missiles at them. So we are really ramping up. And so I'm reading the Rolling Stone review of your interview with Putin, and I just want to read this little part to you and get your response to it. They said that the title of the article was the top 10 WTF moments from Oliver Stone's interview with Vladimir Putin, and this was number 8, I think. In April 2016, the international community was briefly alarmed when a pair of Russian jets buzzed low an American destroyer, the USS Donald Cook, in the Baltic Sea north of Russia. The show of aggression was a classic Cold War move, but a rare and alarming one in the modern age. The incident blew over after the ship turned around, but according to Putin, the Russian military was brought to the brink. In a chilling, casual tone, the president says that missiles could have been trained on the Donald Cook because our commanders have always been authorized to use any means for the defense of the Russian Federation. When Stone is taken aback by this, Putin replies, "Who is trying to provoke whom? Never mind that the destroyer was in international waters at the time." Now, we all know how ridiculous that reporting is by the Rolling Stone right there. As we just laid out, the aggressor. What is our warship doing in the Baltic off the coast of Russia in the first place would be the first question. Now, how would you respond to that criticism from the Rolling Stone?
All that is so fascinating, by the way, reminded me a lot of the Cuban Missile Crisis because of the closeness of it. But all that is based around the Crimean situation. And there again, Americans got a false picture. It's Russian aggression in Crimea. They never bothered to say that Russia already had 25,000 troops in Crimea under treaty, and that the instigation to join Russia, the referendum, was initiated by the Crimean parliament, which existed way before this crisis. The Crimean people spoke for themselves. And what tops the argument for me is that if you look at the whole situation, there was no violence there. The Ukrainian army, I think there were about 20,000 Ukrainian troops, said, go in peace. They did not contest the Russian troops that were there because they know that the Ukrainians who live there are pro-Russian. They speak Russian. They are Russian. So, I mean, this whole thing has been blown up and misinterpreted and distorted for the American people. Crimea was the greatest transfer non-violently of sovereignty that we've seen in the modern era. Anyway, what we had done in Kosovo, by comparison, was the same thing, except it was much bloodier.
So,
and I don't want to go too much detail, but this was the Donald Cook incident is based around the fact that Russia had a major military base there, always has had, at the mouth of the Black Sea, and that's their sphere of interest. It has been that historically, going back through the ages. So for the United States to start sending battleships with Tomahawk cruisers into the Black Sea is not a good idea.
Right. How? Like, I was surprised to see Rolling. I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't read Rolling Stone enough, but I was surprised I usually read just Matt Taibbi in Rolling Stone, and he's always on point. Are you used to that kind of reporting, that kind of BS, and that's why it doesn't throw you so much?
I hope you understand that. I have to have a pretty thick skin to survive. I mean, if I took everything personally, it's been hard for me to get, ever since JFK, I guess I crossed the line. And my version of American history, which you can get in Untold History of the United States, which is, I think, based on fact. There's not one fiction in that entire series. We had to double check it with CBS lawyers, with Showtime lawyers. Believe me, we worked very hard on it. Check that series out, and that's my position on America through basically since 1890. But basically, take a look at what happens after World War II. We accelerate into this militant power. Nobody on earth has the weapons we have. And as you pointed out the other day, Russia's spending 1/12 approximately of what we spend on military. So, and China about a third of what we spend on military. So where is all this expenditure going? Where is this money going? Is it going to private contractors? Is it going to troops? I mean, it's such a waste that we have. I want to get, let's go on to another point, which is significant. Can we? Or
sure, yes.
And I mean, we have to take into account President Putin's recent speech of Thursday, 2 weeks ago, when he got in front of the Congress there, sort of a State of the Union speech. And he said, we, very quietly, not threateningly, he said, we're going to take care of the domestic economy. This is our needs. But he said, as to foreign, he mentioned that we are under threat from the United States and NATO. And he said, let them hear very clearly, listen to us. We have devised a whole new generation. We have, behind your backs, we have devised a whole new generation of nuclear warfare that is beyond what you think we have. And that was the amazing speech, because the United States has, in fact, spent $1 trillion or something like this, don't know the exact number, on ABM missiles surrounding Russia, surrounding China. Those ABMs are useless now. If President Putin's weapons, what he's talking about, and he showed animations of them, he couldn't show the real thing. Why should he? If what he said was true, and I believe him, and I don't think he's a man who bluffs, we have no defense against these new Russian, the missiles and the underwater submarines. This ICBM, fastest ever. The cruise missile he's devised with nuclear engine. No one's had a nuclear engine. We've had nuclear warheads, but a nuclear engine this small in a cruise missile that can go on and on and on, almost practically for I don't know what amount of time, and can circle, dip, dive, is the most dangerous thing we've ever faced. We don't even see it coming. In other words, it's not in our interest at this point to think along those first strike mentality that we've had for so long. If you go back to first strike, that was the idea that we could circle Russia and our ABMs would kill off any retaliation if we hit them with a first strike. Okay, this is a big speech, and it was delivered very quietly, but seriously, and I think it is I imagine we have some intelligent people in this country, in the Pentagon, left, who can see where this is going. Not only that did Putin say this, which nobody's taken into account, but he also said, you are going to, now that I'm saying this, you Americans probably are going to do your utmost to spend more money and to try to outdo this, right? That'll be your next step. But let me tell you this, we're already working on the next step. Now, I've talked to a couple of scientists, and one of them worked in the rocket business in Russia, and he told me some interesting, I don't want to share it with you right now, but obviously this thing points to space. America's been won't sign a space treaty with Russia, or China, will not sign it. So America's goals to people who should be our allies seem to be, we are out to regime change you or to destruct you. This is a message we give off constantly. We should be partners. Mr. Roosevelt, after World War II, he said, well, there is a grand alliance here between U.S., Russia, China, and Britain. This was his picture of the world if he had lived. A grand alliance was the word. Why Russia was allowed to become our enemy in this phony Cold War that we fought in 1947 is one of the great tragedies of modern life. Everyone, I grew up under it, you did. We've all felt the fear of it. And now I feel more fear than when I was 15, 16 years old during the Cuban crisis. I'm more scared of this. I was reassured by Mr. Putin's speech. I'll tell you why. Because what he was saying is, don't start something you can't finish. You're not going to win. That is actually what he was saying, that the world is going to go back to madness, this mad quality, mutual assured destruction. There is no way you're going to take out Russia on a first strike. We'll get you. So when you see these weapons, they're pretty impressive. Hypersonic missiles, underwater submarines. That, by the way, an underwater submarine, just think about it, with a nuclear warhead, you need 3 of them. You need one in the Gulf, you need one in the Atlantic, and one in the Pacific. You will have tsunamis so enormous coming into the East Coast, West Coast, and the southern belly of the United States. Tsunamis across the Gulf of Mexico. Like, remember Thailand, but that kind of size. These are gigantic explosions, and all you need are 3 of them, 3 of these submarines to get through, and apparently they're stealthy and they're nuclear powered. Nuclear engine, think about it. I've never conceived of a nuclear engine, nor have you.
No.
You should think about this.
So no, I have. My co-host on the Aggressive Progressive says to me that he's not afraid of nuclear war or war with Russia like you are and like I am. He says because he thinks that the rich people won't allow this to happen, that the people who really control everything, the people with all the money, aren't going to allow that to happen. What do you say to that?
It's a wonderful belief. I'd like to believe it. I did for many years. I thought, the Pentagon is in control of this situation, but the politicians have seemed to be more hysterical than ever. Their hysterical reaction to the so-called Russian meddling, the reaction to Clinton's loss, the concept of violating NATO, all this has led me to believe that the military is either looking for more money from the government in order to build up its budgets and is ignoring the consequence, or thinks that Russia is not strong enough to resist, which is a possibility. I would not, and I think that's why Mr. Putin's speech is crucial. It sets a new balance. It says, we have more than you think. But you tell me. We can't. Have you analyzed it? You looked at Dr. Strangelove. I looked at Dr. Strangelove with Mr. Putin, and I showed it to him. I wanted him to react to it. You saw the madness of the two powers in 1962 or whatever it was, 62, where you see, at that point in time, and go back in time, the United States had a first strike policy. When Eisenhower, although he condemned the military-industrial complex, when he left office, actually did more than any president to build it up. And he built up this, you mentioned it the other day, this PSYOPs plan, basically to wipe out China and Russia at the same time. 600 million people were targeted. That was the idea of the first strike, that if we hit Cuba, we're going to hit China and Russia at the same time. We're not going to hesitate. And our first strike ability, and we had it, by the way. The thinking in the Pentagon in 1960-62 area is very much the Curtis LeMay thinking. He's the guy who bombed the shit out of Japan before the atomic, and was in charge of the atomic bomb and the dropping of it. But he said very clearly that if we hit Russia now in 1960-62, they want that we can beat them. If we don't, they're going to arm up and they're going to match us, which they did in the 1970s because they took a lesson away from the missile strike. Think about the first strike. Don't imagine the United States is not considering this possibility.
Wow, that's scary, and that's horrible to think about. And if I could go ahead.
I post on my Facebook page. I posted the 11-minute speech that Putin gave. It's a powerful speech. It's probably the most important speech of the year, and probably the people who are the most important. The Man of the Year bullshit that we do every year with all the stuff we talk about is all nonsense. Russian meddling. The Men of the Year are the Russian scientists who took this to the next stage.
So, what do you? I just want to touch back on the RussiaGate thing. Now, to me, it's filled with modern day McCarthyism. I didn't live through the first McCarthyism or McCarthy scare. I couldn't imagine that it happened again, but it's being pushed by the left right now, which is mind-boggling to me. So, would you equate it with McCarthyism? They're doing it to Jeremy Corbyn even across the pond, and they're doing it now. They're saying anybody who's progressive. So Jill Stein's a Putin puppet, and of course Bernie Sanders was boosted by the Russians. So now, isn't this how it always works, that they use this commie Red Scare to shut down the left?
This is an old story. Yes, if you remember, a lot of the people who were blacklisted, Dalton Trumbo among them, said that it's the left that sells you out, too. The left did not protect those people. They were scared. A lot of columnists, a lot of people, I remember those years because my dad was very anti-Russian. He was a Republican conservative. He voted for Eisenhower. And we had friends who were liberal. Because my father was an intelligent man. He had a lot of, and those people, even in our social world, had to kind of bow their heads. They had to tame down what they were saying. The concept of fighting for liberal ideas, for the black civil rights, these kind of things were under threat. In other words, you know very well that the moment the black civil rights movement started up again in the 50s, 60s, they attributed communism as being behind it. Mm-hmm. Moscow, even Lyndon Johnson thought so. And during the Vietnam War, against the opposition to the Vietnam War, they thought it was communist inspired. So the left they've always divided the left in this country, in the labor issues, everywhere. This is a tactic, and it works because the left folds. Hillary Clinton, of course, is part of the problem, but her husband was too, because he's the one who started the NATO expansion. But I think all this is minor compared to, I'm saying all this RussiaGate crap. I mean, it's boring to me, but I'm sure they live on it on television and they sell it and sell it and sell it. But it's so detailed and nonsensical. The big issue is, if I was Putin, I don't give a shit what you guys in America are saying. I'm telling you this. If you come at us, we'll come back at you. And that's what counts in the world, power. And he left a pretty strong message. So let's drop all this junky dialogue. And it's just, you're wasting time too, Jimmy. I mean, I love you when you're doing it, but God almighty, you're fighting a beast. You're not going to win it. You're fighting little details here and there. Think big.
Okay, I will try to think big.
Not think like Putin is thinking, because you have to. The United States is a threatening animal. And this is for China too. Now, the people who say, well, Russia would be just as bad, China just as bad. Well, I'd like to see proof of that. You know, the United States has done a pretty bad job with other countries of telling them what to do.
So how do you see all this ending up? Do you see this ending up in a particular way? Is it all going to go away once Trump gets out of office, or will it ever stop?
Well, what they're trying to do now is force Trump to take a strong position against Russia. They'll force him to say something awful and mean, and it'll strike up some kind of another kind of race, another kind of insulting the country. I mean, Russia's used to it, but I don't think as long as they have the cards to play, which they do, they're going to much care whether it's Trump or Clinton attacking them. In other words, they're buttoned up, they're ready for it, and they were ready for war 2-3 years ago on the Ukraine issue. They have to be. What I like about Putin, and I think he just doesn't play games, he doesn't bluff. Whereas Mr. Trump talks sound and fury, bombing North Korea to the end. You know, on North Korea, I mean, I don't think you know as an American citizen that China and Russia have offered a peace plan. You probably couldn't even outline that peace plan, but it's a very serious one. Forming an economic zone for North Korea that's very of lucrative interest to them to stay alive. The North Koreans would take that plan. It's the United States that keeps kind of cutting Russia down, cutting China down, and saying we have to go our way. It's our highway, and you're walking it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work with North Korea. So, but I don't think our media is reporting any of this.
No, our media is not reporting. You know, people ask me about my comedian friends ask me about the success of this show. And they say, what are you doing? And I said, well, all you have to do is tell the truth about Syria, and you're already the best newsman in America, because you're not going to hear the truth about Syria anywhere in mainstream news media. So they leave me a big lane. So and that's why a guy like me has a show like this. So go ahead.
You're very important, actually. You and Abby Martin and people like you, who are the people like Glenn Greenwald, people like there's quite a few columnists here and there that are really seen through the lies.
Yeah, there's not enough of those voices. God bless Abby Martin, Lee Camp, Kyle Kalinske, people like that really doing great work.